This story was written for hearts like yours. If you want one just for you, look below.
The rain taps against the window like fingertips testing glass, soft and uncertain. I sit here with my tea going cold, watching the steam curl and vanish, just like the words I never got to say to him. The scent of old books and damp earth drifts in through the cracked window, and suddenly, I'm 10 years old again, sitting on the porch with Dad as he points out constellations I could never quite see. "Look closer," he'd say, "sometimes the brightest things take time to show themselves." I didn't understand then. I think I do now. The ache of missing him isn't a sharp pain anymore, it's a dull weight, like a stone I've learned to carry in my pocket. Some days, I forget it's there. Other days, it pulls me down like an anchor. But tonight, with the rain humming against the roof, I let myself remember. The way his hands, rough from years of work, could still be so gentle when fixing my scraped knees. The way he'd hum off key while making breakfast, eggs always a little too runny, toast always a little too dark. Imperfect. Perfect. The clock on the wall ticks steadily, marking time in a way that feels both comforting and cruel. I wrap my hands around the cooling mug, letting the residual warmth seep into my skin. Outside, a street lamp flickers, one of those old orange ones that cast everything in a honeyed glow. It reminds me of the lamp that used to sit on Dad's workbench, how its light would spill across the garage floor like melted butter. A sudden gust of wind sends a flurry of raindrops skittering across the window pane. The sound makes my breath catch. It's exactly like the noise Dad's old pickup truck used to make when he'd roll down the gravel driveway after work. That particular crunch of tires on stone lives in some deep, untouched place in my memory. I close my eyes and for just a moment, I'm sitting shotgun in that battered truck again. The vinyl seat sticks to the backs of my thighs in summer. The smell of oil and peppermint gum. The way Dad would tap his fingers on the steering wheel in a rhythm all his own. The memory is so vivid I can almost taste the ice cream he'd sometimes surprise me with, vanilla soft serve in a wafer cone that would inevitably drip down my fingers. He'd laugh and call me Sprinkles because no matter how careful I tried to be, I always ended up wearing most of it. My tea has gone completely cold now. I take a sip anyway, the bitterness startling on my tongue. How strange that something can be both comforting and disappointing at once. Isn't that how grief works too? The rain has slowed to a drizzle, each drop hitting the window with a soft, final sound. Like the last few kernels in a popcorn maker. Like Dad's quiet snores from his recliner during Sunday afternoon football games. Like the way he'd say goodnight, kiddo, right before turning out my bedroom light. I wonder if he knew how much I loved those ordinary moments. The everyday magic I didn't realize was magic until it was gone. A car passes outside, its headlights sweeping across the walls like a lighthouse beam. For a brief moment, the shadows in the room rearrange themselves into familiar shapes. There, in the corner, is that the outline of Dad's favorite chair? No, just my mind playing tricks. But isn't that what memory is? Our hearts playing tricks on our eyes, making us see what we most want to see. I take another sip of cold tea. The bitterness has mellowed now, or maybe I've just gotten used to it. The house settles around me with a series of small creaks and pops, the nighttime language of an empty home. I used to be afraid of these sounds when I was little. Dad would tell me it was just the house breathing, that every home has its own heartbeat if you listen closely enough. I listen now. Really listen. And for the first time in years, I don't feel quite so alone. The dim yellow light from the table lamp pools around me like liquid gold, casting long shadows that sway with the flickering flame of the vanilla-scented candle beside it. The second hand of the clock marches forward with military precision, tick, 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 each sound a tiny hammer against my heart. I run my finger along the rim of the teacup, feeling the tiny chip where I dropped it last winter. Funny how we keep broken things when they've been with us long enough. A knot forms in my throat as I remember the last time I saw Dad. I was rushing out the door, late for some meeting that feels so unimportant now. He'd called after me, "Wait, I made your favorite," but I'd just waved him off, shouting over my shoulder that I'd grab coffee on the way. The image of him standing in the doorway, holding that stupid world's best daughter mug he loved so much, still cuts deeper than any knife. Why is it that we never think it's the last time? The last breakfast. The last hug. The last chance to say all the things we assume we'll have tomorrow to say. The candle flickers violently as a draft sneaks through the old window frame, making the shadows dance wildly across the walls. For a heartbeat, it looks like someone moving through the room. My breath catches before I can stop it. I should have visited more. I should have called more. The should-haves pile up like unpaid bills, each one heavier than the last. That last year, when he started forgetting little things, where he put his keys, what day it was, I told myself it was just normal aging. Too wrapped up in my own life to see what was right in front of me. A car horn blares outside, startling me back to the present. The tea leaves at the bottom of my cup have formed strange patterns. For a superstitious moment, I imagine they might spell out some message. But there are no answers in tea leaves, just like there are no do-overs in life. The room feels smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. I get up to open the window wider, letting the cool night air wash over my face. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, the sound lonely and echoing. I can almost hear Dad's voice saying, "Don't do that, you'll catch cold," like he always did when I'd open windows in winter. I never listened. Now I'd give anything to hear him fuss over me just one more time. The candle sputters, nearly going out before steadying again. That's grief, isn't it? Just when you think the light's about to disappear, it finds a way to keep burning. Maybe not as bright. Maybe not as steady. But still there. I take a deep breath, tasting the night air mixed with candle wax and the faintest hint of Earl Grey. The combination is unexpectedly comforting, like a recipe made from equal parts sorrow and sweetness. Outside, the branches of the old maple tree tap against the window pane, a sound so familiar it might as well be the house itself saying, "I remember too." The candle finally gutters out, leaving behind the faint scent of vanilla and a thin wisp of smoke that curls upward like a question mark. I should get up, wash this teacup, prepare for bed, but my limbs feel heavy, weighted with all these memories. Across the room, the old photograph on the bookshelf catches the lamplight. Dad grinning in his ridiculous fishing hat, the one with all the lures stuck in the brim. I can still hear his laugh when I'd grown about it. A true fisherman never cares about looking silly, kiddo. My fingers trace the edge of the bookshelf absent-mindedly, coming away dusty. He'd hate that. Dad kept everything meticulous, his workshop tools all in their proper places, his books alphabetized. I used to tease him about it. Now I find myself straightening picture frames in waiting rooms, folding towels just so, little rituals that feel like messages in a bottle tossed to some unseen shore. A sudden memory surfaces, me at 16, slamming the door after some stupid argument about curfew. Through the wall, I heard him sigh that particular sigh, the one that meant he was disappointed but would never say it. Why do we hurt the ones who love us most when we're hurting? The furnace kicks on with a rumble, startling me. The vents exhale warm air that smells faintly of the lemon oil Dad used to polish the furniture. For a wild moment, I consider leaving everything exactly as it is: the cold tea, the spent candle, the dust on the shelf. Maybe some things deserve to stay untouched. Through the window, the first hints of dawn begin to bleed into the night sky. That particular shade of blue-gray always reminded Dad of worn denim. "Look at that," he'd say on early fishing mornings, "the world's putting on its favorite pair of jeans." My eyes burn from lack of sleep, from too much remembering. The photograph seems to glow brighter as daylight approaches, his smile becoming more vivid. I used to think grief was like a storm you eventually sailed out of. But it's more like learning to rebuild your ship while still at sea, hammering new boards over the broken ones, always slightly damp, always slightly off balance, but somehow still floating. The morning birds begin their tentative songs outside, first one, then another, until the whole neighborhood is alive with their chatter. Life stubbornly continuing, even when we wish it would pause just for a moment. I finally rise, my joints stiff from sitting too long. The teacup goes into the sink with a quiet clink. As I run the water, I catch my reflection in the kitchen window, my eyes tired but clear, the set of my jaw so like his. Maybe we don't ever really say goodbye to the people we love. Maybe we just learn to recognize them in new ways, in the turn of a phrase we suddenly use, in habits we didn't mean to inherit, in the quiet moments when the light hits just right and the air smells familiar. The coffee maker gurgles to life as dawn properly breaks. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a car engine turns over. The world is waking up. And so, somehow, will I. I find myself standing at the kitchen window, watching sunlight creep across the backyard where Dad's vegetable garden used to thrive. The raised beds sit empty now, just weathered wood and stubborn weeds. But this morning, for the first time in years, I imagine turning that soil again. My hands remember how he taught me to test the earth's readiness, squeezing a handful to see if it crumbled just right. Plants are like people, he'd say, dirt under his fingernails, they need good roots and room to grow. Maybe this spring I'll plant tomatoes where his beefsteaks once flourished. Not to replace, but to continue. The coffee finishes brewing with a final sigh. I pour it into his favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle that he refused to throw away. The ceramic warms my palms as steam rises to brush my face. Some mornings, if I close my eyes while holding it just so, I can almost pretend his hands are overlapping mine. If you're waking up into a world without someone you love, let yourself do it slowly. One mug. One breath. One bird singing at a time. There's no right way to do this, only your way. I reach for the notebook on the counter, its pages warped from years of kitchen humidity. The first blank page stares back, intimidating in its whiteness. Then I remember how Dad used to say writing letters was like sending your thoughts on vacation. My pen hovers before finally touching down. Dear Dad. Today I noticed the lilac bush by the garage is budding early. You always said that meant we'd have a wet spring. The words come easier than I expected, flowing like a conversation we might have had over Sunday pancakes. I tell him about the leaky faucet I finally fixed, using that wrench he gave me, about how my daughter asked why the Big Dipper has a handle. I told her your joke about cosmic soup, about all the ordinary moments I wish he could have seen. My handwriting slopes unevenly across the page, ink smudging where tears fell without permission. But there's relief in this, like opening a window in a stuffy room. Maybe grief is just love with nowhere to go, and these letters are giving it a path. Later, I'll tuck this note into the old cookie tin where I keep his fishing licenses and pocket knives. Not because I believe he'll read it, but because the act of writing feels like leaving breadcrumbs back to myself. The morning has properly arrived now. Sunlight stripes the kitchen floor, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. I take my coffee to the back porch, where the air smells of damp earth and possibility. That tightness in my chest hasn't disappeared, but it's shifted, no longer a boulder, but a stone I can hold in my palm, examining its weight and texture. A cardinal lands on the fence post, its red feathers brilliant against the grey wood. Dad would have whistled back at it, trying to mimic its song. I try now, my attempt clumsy but earnest. The bird cocks its head, then trills a response before taking flight. Small rituals. Ordinary magic. This is how we keep people with us. Not frozen in time, but living alongside us in the ways we tend gardens, tell stories, notice the birds. The pain doesn't vanish, but it makes space, for memories, for growth, for mornings that arrive whether we're ready for them or not. I sip my coffee, now lukewarm, and watch the steam rise one last time before disappearing into the morning air. Just like love. Just like grief. Just like all things that can't be held, but are felt all the same. The cardinal returns, this time with a mate. They hop along the fence line in that jerky, precise way birds have, stopping to peck at invisible things between the wooden slats. I hold very still, the way Dad taught me when we'd go birdwatching. Patience, he'd whisper, barely moving his lips. Wild things come to those who wait quietly. My coffee has gone cold again, but I don't mind. There's something comforting about how the bitterness intensifies as it cools, a reminder that not everything sweet lasts, and that's okay. The morning air carries the scent of freshly cut grass from a neighbor's yard. That smell always takes me back to summer evenings when Dad would mow the lawn, the sound of the push mower mixing with cicadas as twilight settled in. I find myself humming that tuneless little melody he always did while working in the yard. It's not a real song, just a series of notes that wandered pleasantly nowhere. My daughter once asked why I was humming that grandpa song, and it stunned me to realize she remembered it too, this insignificant little habit that somehow became part of our family's soundtrack. The wind picks up, rustling the pages of my notebook where I'd written to Dad. I press my palm flat against the paper to keep it from blowing away, and notice my hands are becoming more like his with each passing year, the same prominent knuckles, the same faint age spots appearing like watercolor stains. Our bodies keep the memories our minds sometimes forget. A truck rumbles down the street, its engine sounding just like Dad's old Chevy. Without thinking, I turn my head the way I used to when I'd hear him coming home from work. The moment stretches thin between past and present until the wrong color truck passes by, breaking the spell. But here's what I'm learning: these moments of mistaken identity aren't betrayals. They're love letters written in the language of muscle memory. When I automatically reach for 2 coffee mugs in the morning. When I catch myself saving the comics section for someone who isn't here to read them. These aren't failures to move on, they're proof of how deeply some people root themselves in our lives. The sun climbs higher, warming my shoulders through my sweater. Somewhere down the street, a child laughs, that unfettered, belly-deep kind of laugh kids have before they learn to temper their joy. Dad was great at that kind of laughing. Even during hard times, he could find something to chuckle about, even if it was just how ridiculous life could be. I take a deep breath and exhale slowly, watching the cardinal pair flutter away to a higher branch. There's garden soil to turn, letters to write, stories to tell. The world keeps spinning, carrying us forward even when we'd rather stay anchored in the past. But maybe moving forward doesn't mean leaving behind, maybe it's more like gathering up all those moments and taking them with us, letting them shape who we're becoming. The notebook page flutters again in the breeze, and this time I let it go, watching as it lifts and dances before settling gently in the grass. Like memories. Like leaves in autumn. Like all things that must eventually find their way back to the earth. The screen door slaps shut behind me as I head to the market, the sound so familiar it barely registers. The morning air carries the scent of baking bread from the corner bakery, another of Dad's favorite smells. I'm halfway down the block when a voice calls out, rough with age but bright with recognition. "Hey there. You're Jack's girl, aren't you?" I turn to see Mr. Peterson from 2 doors down, now leaning on a cane but still wearing the same red suspenders he always did. His face is more lined, his hair fully white, but his eyes crinkle at the corners just the same. Before I can answer, he's shuffling forward, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "Your dad," he pauses, clears his throat. "Hell of a man. You know he patched my roof after that big storm in '99? Wouldn't take a dime for it. Just said, 'Peterson, you'd do the same for me.'" He chuckles, shaking his head. "Thing is, I wouldn't have. I was never much with tools. But your dad, he never kept score." The sidewalk seems to tilt slightly under my feet. I'd forgotten that storm, how Dad had come home exhausted for weeks, smelling of tar paper and sweat. I'd assumed it was overtime at the shop. Mr. Peterson's grip tightens. "And when my Ruth was sick with the cancer, came by every Thursday like clockwork. Left a grocery bag by the door, never knocked, never asked for thanks. Just." He makes a motion with his free hand, like something being set down gently. A car honks somewhere down the street, but the sound feels distant. I can suddenly picture it so clearly, Dad's careful handwriting on those grocery lists, the way he'd sometimes come home with extra bags and mutter about errands. How many other kindnesses did he hide in plain sight? Mr. Peterson's eyes grow damp. I tried to thank him at Ruth's funeral, but he just hugged me and said, "We're neighbors." Like that explained everything. He pats my arm before letting go. "You've got his eyes, you know. Same way of listening, really listening." I manage a nod, my throat too tight for words. The sunlight feels suddenly brighter, the colors of the street more vivid, as if the world has tilted to show me a hidden angle. We part ways at the corner, but his stories walk with me. I pass the old barber shop where Dad got his monthly haircut, the park bench where he'd feed pigeons, calling them urban doves to make me laugh, and realize how much of him lives in these streets. Not just in my memories, but in the lives he quietly touched. The market's produce section smells of earth and ripe tomatoes. As I pick through the bell peppers, I overhear 2 older men debating carburetors near the checkout. Their grease-stained hands and easy banter remind me so sharply of Dad and his shop friends that my chest aches. I'm weighing onions when a voice behind me says, "You're Jack's daughter." Turning, I see a stranger, a broad-shouldered man about Dad's age, his dark hair gone mostly gray. He holds a wooden box under one arm and a paper bag in the other. Before I can respond, he continues, "I'd know that profile anywhere. You have your mother's mouth, but the rest is all Jack." His smile is both warm and hesitant. "I'm Charlie. Your dad and I served together in Nam." The world narrows to the grain of the wooden box in his hands, its surface worn smooth from years of handling. Charlie shifts his weight, the way men of that generation do when emotions get too close. Meant to come by sooner, but he trails off, and we both understand. Grief makes procrastinators of us all. Right there between the onions and potatoes, Charlie opens the box. Inside rests Dad's old Zippo lighter, the one with the USMC emblem I'd thought lost years ago, and a faded photo of two impossibly young soldiers arm in arm, their uniforms too big, their grins too wide for the jungle behind them. "Your dad saved my dumb ass more times than I can count," Charlie says, running a thumb over the photo. "Got this lighter off a supply sergeant by singing Elvis songs for an hour straight. Worst impersonation you ever heard." His laugh is sudden and bright, startling nearby shoppers. "But damn, could your old man carry a tune when he wanted to?" A memory surfaces, Dad humming Blue Suede Shoes while changing the car oil. I'd never known why. Charlie presses the box into my hands. "We wrote this terrible song in a foxhole, something about mosquitoes and sea rations. Your dad kept the lyrics in his helmet lining." His voice drops. "Visited him at the end, you know. He made me promise to sing it at his funeral, but..." He shakes his head. "Couldn't do it. Too many ghosts." The market noises fade, the beeping scanners, the rustling bags, as Charlie hums a few off-key bars. It's ridiculous and heartfelt and so utterly Dad that tears spill over before I can stop them. Right there by the potatoes, Charlie pulls me into a hug that smells of motor oil and spearmint, just like Dad's used to. When we part, he wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. "Ah hell, Jack always said I was a sentimental old fool." He pushes the paper bag at me. "Brought you some of that spice cake he liked. His ma's recipe." The bag is still warm. I inhale cinnamon and nutmeg, and suddenly it's Sunday morning in our old kitchen, Dad flour-dusted and grinning as he pulls a lopsided cake from the oven. Secret ingredient, he'd wink, is burning the edges just a little. Charlie walks me home, sharing stories I've never heard, Dad winning a poker game with a pair of twos, Dad trading his watch for a bottle of antibiotics to save a village child. Each tale is a tile in a mosaic I didn't know existed. At my doorstep, Charlie hesitates. "He talked about you all the time, you know. Showed off every school photo, bragged about your grades." He smiles at my surprise. Jack wasn't much for speeches, but love doesn't always need words. The wooden box sits heavy in my hands, full of secrets and songs and a version of my father I'm only now meeting. It occurs to me that grief isn't just about mourning what we've lost, it's about discovering what we never knew we had. As Charlie disappears down the street, I press the lighter to my palm, feeling its weight. The afternoon sun warms my back like a hand guiding me inside. There are cakes to taste, songs to learn, and so many stories left to uncover. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, a cardinal calls, bright and insistent, as if reminding me that even now, there are still messages to be heard, if only I listen closely enough. The wooden box sits on my kitchen table, sunlight catching its brass hinges. I trace the initials carved clumsily into the lid, JW, and imagine Dad as a young man, pocketknife in hand, leaving this small mark of ownership. Inside, beneath the lighter and photograph, I find what Charlie mentioned, a yellowed scrap of paper with smudged pencil lyrics titled Mosquito Blues. Sitting in a foxhole, scratching at my bites. Sea rations for breakfast, dinner, and night. The handwriting is unmistakably Dad's, those looping GS, the way he always crossed his T's too hard. A laugh bubbles up as I read the ridiculous chorus, then catches in my throat when I reach the last verse. "When I get home, gonna hold my girl so tight. Never let her wonder if she's my whole damn light." The paper trembles in my hands. That girl was me, though I wouldn't be born for another decade. This silly song contains the first proof I've ever held that I existed in Dad's imagination long before I arrived. The spice cake's aroma fills the kitchen as I brew fresh coffee. Following Charlie's instructions, I leave the cake slightly over-baked at the edges, just how Dad preferred it. The first bite floods my mouth with flavors I'd forgotten: molasses, clove, that hint of burnt sugar he called the good part. I nearly drop my fork when the doorbell rings. Through the frosted glass, I see an outline that makes my pulse jump for one impossible second. It's Dad's broad shoulders, his slight stoop. But it's Mr. Henderson from the hardware store, holding a dented toolbox. "Found this clearing out the back room," he says, hefting the familiar red metal case. "Your dad left it for repairs years ago. Forgot to tell him we never could fix that stuck latch." His knuckles whiten on the handle. "Kept meaning to return it, but you know how time gets away." The toolbox smells of machine oil and sawdust, exactly as Dad's workshop did. When I flip the stubborn latch, it releases with a pop, revealing his meticulous organization: wrenches lined up by size, screws sorted in baby food jars, a piece of masking tape labeling each compartment in his all-caps printing. Mr. Henderson clears his throat. "Jack taught me how to change my first tire behind the store. Middle of winter, mind you." He touches the toolbox's dented corner. "Said tools were just an excuse. What really fixes things is patience and showing up." As he leaves, I notice Dad's old work jacket hanging in my front closet, the one I've kept for years but never worn. On impulse, I slip it on. The sleeves are too long, the shoulders too wide, but the weight feels comforting. In the pocket, my fingers find forgotten treasures: a bent nail, a stub of pencil, 2 lemon drops fused together in their wrapper. The afternoon passes in a haze of discoveries. I find Dad's handwriting in the margins of my cookbooks: "Add more garlic," his doodles on old grocery lists, little fish in the corners, his voice in the memories surfacing like bubbles in soda. When my daughter comes home from school, her eyes light up at the spice cake. "Grandpa's favorite," she exclaims, already reaching. She never met him, but knows him through these fragments I've passed down: the silly songs, the burnt cake edges, the way we always stop to listen when cardinals sing. As we sit together at the table, her licking frosting off her fingers, me tracing the lyrics to Mosquito Blues, I realize grief and gratitude are twin threads in the same fabric. The pain of absence is the flip side of the joy of having loved so deeply. Night falls softly outside. Somewhere, a screen door slams the way ours used to. A neighbor laughs in a cadence that almost sounds familiar. The wooden box, the toolbox, the jacket, they're not just objects, but portals to a man more complex and wonderful than I'd fully understood. My daughter hums as she clears our plates, a tuneless little melody that wanders pleasantly nowhere. It takes me a moment to recognize it: Dad's song. The one without a name. The one that's now ours. I join in, our voices weaving together in the warm kitchen light, stitching past to present with every note. Outside, the first stars appear, the same ones Dad taught me to see through, to the stories waiting just beyond. The night wraps around the house like a well-worn quilt as I tuck my daughter into bed. She clutches the old photograph of Dad and Charlie, her small fingers careful on its edges. "Tell me the lighter story again," she whispers, though we both know she could recite it herself by now. I settle on the edge of her bed, the springs creaking the same way they did when Dad would read me bedtime stories. "Well," I begin, running my thumb over the Zippo's worn marine emblem, "when Grandpa and Charlie were stationed overseas, they..." Her eyelids grow heavy as the familiar tale unfolds: the poker game, the supply sergeant, the terrible Elvis impression. By the time I reach the part where Dad won the lighter, her breathing has deepened into sleep. But I keep whispering the story anyway, because some gifts are meant to be given more than once. Downstairs, I find myself standing in front of the hall closet where Dad's old winter coat still hangs. The fabric smells faintly of pipe tobacco and the pine-scented car fresheners he loved. On impulse, I slip it on and am immediately 10 years old again, burying my face in this same scratchy wool during our goodnight hugs. The pockets yield more treasures: a crumpled gas receipt from 2004, a penny flattened on railroad tracks. He always stopped to put coins on the rails during our walks, and my breath catches a folded square of notebook paper. Reminders, it says in his familiar block letters. Asterisk call Sue about piano recital. Buy more birdseed. Tell Katie the foxhole story. Fix porch step asterisk. The date at the top is 2 weeks before his diagnosis. 2 weeks before our world tilted. I sink onto the bottom stair, clutching this ordinary list that somehow contains everything: his thoughtfulness, his constant fixing, his determination to remember what mattered. That last unchecked item, tell Katie the foxhole story, hangs in the air between past and present. Did he forget? Or did he think there would be more time? The porch step still creaks in the same spot when I step outside. The night air is cool on my cheeks as I sit exactly where Dad would have after a long day, looking up at the same stars. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, an owl calls a sound he would have identified immediately, then mimicked perfectly. I pull his coat tighter around me. The neighborhood sleeps, but the world feels vibrantly alive with memories. The tree he planted the year I was born sways in the breeze, now twice as tall as the house. The sidewalk crack he always warned me about, that's a tripper, remains unfixed, a familiar hazard for a new generation of bike riders. Inside, the spice cake sits half-eaten on the counter. The toolbox waits by the back door. The song lyrics rest safely in the wooden box. All these fragments, these pieces of a life that somehow add up to more than their sum. The owl calls again, closer this time. I imagine Dad beside me, elbows on knees, nodding at the sound. Great horned, he'd say with certainty. Then he'd wink and add, but don't take my word for it, look it up. Tomorrow, I think, I'll show my daughter how to use his tools. We'll plant tomatoes in his honor. We'll burn the cake edges just a little. And when the stars come out, we'll sit together on this creaky step, listening for owls and telling stories, both the ones we know by heart, and the ones we're only beginning to discover. The wind picks up, rustling the old receipt still clutched in my hand. For the first time in years, the ache of missing him feels softer, like a bruise finally fading to yellow. Not gone, never gone, but no longer sharp enough to steal my breath. Somewhere in the darkness, the owl takes flight, its wings beating the air in a rhythm that sounds almost like a song. Or maybe that's just my heart, learning to carry the melody. The morning arrives soft and golden, spilling across the kitchen floor in wide pools of light. I stand barefoot in one of these sunbeams, watching dust motes dance while the coffee brews. My daughter pads in, sleep-rumpled and yawning, dragging Grandpa's old work jacket behind her like a cape. "Can we make the burnt cake again today?" she asks, climbing onto the counter the way I used to, the way Dad never minded, though it drove Mom crazy. I hand her an egg to crack, remembering how Dad would say, "Shells add texture," whenever fragments ended up in the batter. She concentrates fiercely, tongue poking out the side of her mouth just like his did during projects. The radio plays an old country song, the kind Dad would turn up loud, singing along off-key while flipping pancakes. Without thinking, I reach to increase the volume. My daughter giggles when I attempt the Twangy chorus, just as I used to laugh at Dad's exaggerated drawl. We're measuring flour when the doorbell rings. Mrs. Ruiz from down the street stands there holding a terracotta pot with a spindly plant. "Found this digging through my garden shed," she says. "Your dad gave me a clipping from his jasmine vine years back. Now mine's grown so big it's taking over the fence." She presses the pot into my hands. "Thought you might like a piece of it." The young plant trembles in the breeze as I set it on the porch railing. Its leaves are still small, but already I catch the faintest trace of that sweet fragrance Dad loved. He used to say jasmine smelled like moonlight given form. Back in the kitchen, my daughter proudly presents our lopsided cake, edges deliberately darkened, just slightly. As we wait for it to cool, she pulls Dad's toolbox into a sunbeam and begins organizing the screws by size, her small fingers precise as she lines them up like metal soldiers. "Grandpa would have loved you so much," I whisper, watching her work. She looks up, flour dusting one cheek. "He does love me," she corrects gently. "Just from farther away now." The cake tastes like memory and molasses. Outside, the jasmine plant stretches toward sunlight, its roots settling into new soil. Somewhere beyond the window, a cardinal calls once, twice, and for the first time in a long while, the air feels not empty, but simply full of different things. The toolbox lid clicks shut. The radio plays on. And in this ordinary morning bright with promise, I realize the most remarkable truth of all. Love never leaves. It simply changes shape.
If you still have words for someone who's gone, let me write them with you. Link below.